Good evening to all, and welcome to this Friday edition of the program. We want to say thank you very much for joining us, very much for joining us. Welcome to the rush, all of you joining us internationally in the region and right here in Guyana. My name is Randolph Critchell. As usual, we're very happy to have you join us on this Friday evening. 432 days, people, 432 days of this fraudulent administration. And I ask the question, are you better off? Is your life any better off? 432 days of confusion and corruption. We want to say thank you very much for joining us. Those of you joining us on YouTube, thank you very much. Remember, do not leave without subscribing to the page for you. If you're joining us on Facebook, any one of the pages you're looking at us on Facebook, we want to say thank you very much. Ensure that you like the page. Ensure that you like the page before you go. Of course, we continue to bring you credible and valid information. What do we have on the cards for today, Friday, folks? What is the lineup for today? Let us see what we have, folks, lined up for you, right? Of course, we're going to be talking about this 14.5% GDP growth that we saw. We're going to talk about what does that mean for you. We're going to have, of course, today's Friday, so we're having our economic contributor or financial contributor, Mr. Elson Low, who's going to break down the numbers for us and talk about how we're doing in terms of our economy. And of course, we're going to be talking about oil. Oil, of course, Guyana found more oil. ExxonMobil finds more oil offshore Guyana. We're going to be talking about that later down in the program. So stay tuned. We're also going to be looking at what is happening there with the Guyana Police Force and the Guyana Fire Service. The Fire Service, of course, said their investigation, nobody confessed. The Guyana Police Force is holding on to the fact that Mr. Green confessed to setting the Brickdam police station ablaze. We're going to be looking at that controversy. Also, we're going to be talking about gas prices. We see the government making an attempt to reduce the tariff on the gasoline and other fuel. And what does that mean for you? And of course, we saw this news breaking today. The permanent secretary of the Ministry of Anderndian Affairs arrested for allegedly taking a bribe. We're going to be talking about that and much more in our program. Of course, we cannot, as we said, we're going to be talking about the fire and breaking down all that we know about the fire. Folks, we're going to give you your greetings as usual. Before we start the program, we like to know where you're joining us from. But before we do that, let's, of course, head to our intro. Let's do it, people. 432 days. Let's unpack.
One time for the bass, all right. Back in the day we used to live Charlotte Street. Just one time for the bass, all right. Back in the day we used to live Charlotte Street. Just learn to walk and speak. Me woulda grab a bucket, 2 stick of milk in and gone in the yard and beat. Miss Paul used to suck up she teeth. We didn't kick as the music sweet. You could hear me little voice in Regent Street, but I'm still in the game. On the stage I'm keeping the flame. Used to jam with Leon and Shane. We used to make enough noise in the neighborhood. Get vexed and call over Dwayne. Tell them music run in me vein. Yesterday.
Right, we're back.
One time for the bass, alright. Back in the day we used to live Charlotte Street. Just learn to walk and speak. Me woulda grab a bucket, 2 stick of milk in and gone in the yard and beat. Miss Paul used to suck up she teeth. We didn't kick as the music sweet. You could hear me little voice in Regent Street, but I'm still in the game. On the stage I'm keeping the flame. Used to jam with Leon and Shane. We used to make enough noise in the neighborhood. Get vexed and call over Dwayne. Tell them music run in me vein. Yesterday.
Right, we're back, folks. We're back and we're ready. Of course, welcome to all of you joining from all over the world. We want to say good night, and thank you very much for being a part of the program. Let me say, we just ensure that we're getting everything right. We're getting everything together. Folks, welcome from Barbados, welcome from Buxton, good night, welcome to the rush, all of you. Let's go back because we know we missed some of them. B Fields of Fire, thank you very much. Thank you very much for tuning in. Let's ensure that everybody is hearing us. Right, loud and clear. Good evening from Tobago. Thank you very much all over the world, folks. Let us know where you're joining us from. Let us know where you're joining us from this afternoon. Watching from Linden. Right, Seattle is in the house. All right, good night, Miss Selby. Good night, Miss Rosie. Good night, Buxton. Thank you very much. Burby's in the house. London is in the house. Good evening to all of you. Right, where are you looking at us from? Let us know where you're joining us from this evening. Linden. Right, good night to all of our usual viewers of the Rush. Our Friday program, we're packed, folks. Tonight we are packed. So tell a friend that we're next 45 minutes to the hour. We're going to be unpacking some credible and valid information. Do not be afraid to share the live stream. Do not be afraid to share the live stream, folks. Let us go right now. Share it far and wide. I'm going to be sharing a few more places so that folks will know that we're on. We just want to say thank you very much for joining us. Of course, folks, this is it. We're going to be sharing information. We're going to be discussing ideas. We're going to be discussing opinions. And we're going to be talking about things that are happening in and around our country. So we want everyone to know what is happening. So share the live stream, 332 days of confusion and corruption. We're going to be talking about so many things this evening. Of course, folks, we saw what played out during the week. iFlood is in the house. Buxton, India. Roberto, thank you very much for joining us all the way from India. Festival City North, Ronvel Plaisance, watching from Barcelona. Filipina Johnson, all the way in Barcelona. We want to say thank you very much for tuning in. Isla Penitence, Caribbean, Queens, Antigua, London, Canada, Pennsylvania. Watching from Paradise. Thank you very much for tuning in from Paradise. I hope it's like paradise up there. Right. Norton Street is in the house. Miss Blackett, thank you very much for tuning in. BVI is in the house always. Jamal Aziz, thank you very much for tuning in. Mr. Aziz, I know that I did not get to collect that thing, but I want to let you know that we are, we will definitely meet up again. We'll definitely meet up again. I'll keep doing the good work that you're doing. Thank you very much to you and your folks. Ontario, Canada, Mocha. Mocha, how are you doing? How are you doing up there in Mocha? Let me say it correctly, Mocha, Arcadia. Eccles in the house. Brooklyn, New York, New Jersey, Norton Street. Folks, we can't spend too long unpacking Lamaha Springs. How are you doing at the back there? How are you doing at the back there in Lamaha Springs? New Amsterdam. Nigel Hope says, watching from the Guyana Police Force. Right. I hope you're not at Brickdam. Let's go, folks. Let's continue to unpack. Let's unpack. Good night, Annandale. Good folks there on the East Coast in Annandale. Welcome. Share the live stream. Folks, this is the period where we share the live stream before we get into the unpacking, before we get into all the things that we want to talk about this evening. Let's ensure that we share the live stream. Just press a little share button at the bottom and share it to your Facebook groups, share it to your WhatsApp groups. Let's unpack, folks. Let's go. You do your part, I do my part. We are unpacking the credible and valid information, folks. Of course, before we get into unpacking, we just want to remind you that you can support what we're doing here in the program. We have a PayPal account, the Rush GY, therushgy@gmail.com, or you can support us via MMG 618-7321 or 617-0244. Help us to continue bringing the credible and valid information to you. But let's get into it, folks. We're going to jump right into our segment with random videos, folks. What is happening in our country? What is happening? As I say good night to all of you coming on. My question this evening, my opening take is, what is happening in our country? That is what I want to know. What is really going on? Now, let's start with some... Miss Thomas, that's Thomas. Thank you very much for tuning in. Let's go. We'll unpack some information tonight, We'll unpack. But let's start with some random videos, folks. From around the country. We should call this segment Around the Country. What has been happening around the country? Let's go.
Make a report on my neighbor that come over and bite me a little paw.
And excuse the, strong language that you may hear in some of these videos. parental discretion is advised if you have children looking at the program. These random videos that we'll share to let's get an idea of what's happening around the country. And let's unpack, because at the end of the program, we will give you an opportunity to have your say. We'll bring in, of course, it is Friday and we want you to have your say. It's a packed program because we have Elson that will come on. We'll talk economics a little later, but then we will ensure that you have your say. That's happening. So the first video that we're showing you here, folks.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon.
I'm calling to make a report on my neighbor that come over and bite my little puppy.
Hello, let me stop calling this phone and so company stupid and put his arm out and stupid people what tell you. Don't call back this phone.
Okay, thank you. I record you.
Fuck you, I don't care what you do.
That, folks, allegedly is a woman calling to report a situation of a dog jumping over their fence to come and bite their puppy, and she's calling the police station. And the response that the police officer gave her, allegedly, speaks to so many things that is wrong with our country. Now, I know there are many other things out there. The police may be stressed out. They may be stressed thin. They may be, overworked and underpaid. But there's still a level of professionalism that you have to apply to situations. If you think that the situation is it doesn't warrant your attention as a police officer, there are ways in which you can deal with things. So allegedly, the woman called the police station, and this is the response that she got.
I'm calling to make a report on my neighbor that come over and bite my little puppy.
Hello, let me stop calling this phone and so company stupid and put his arm out and stupid people what tell you.
Stop calling the phone to complain about stupidness. That was what the woman was told, folks. As we go through the random videos. Your thoughts, folks. Your thoughts. So let's continue in some more videos. We saw this video surfacing also.
Somebody like the rabbit at the bottom of the lamp post.
Folks,
Somebody like the rabbit at the bottom of the lamp post.
We asked if Guyana is a real place. As we go through these random videos, as we start the program, folks, your thoughts. We will take your thoughts at the end of the program. But we have to ask sometimes if it's a real place. I don't even have words. Folks, and again, viewer discretion advice. So some of the videos that we're going through our random video segment. But today we saw another video surfacing which highlights the issue that we have with domestic violence in our country. And we saw this crazy video. We saw this. This is downtown. It looks like at the corner. It looks like Alexander Street. This is a man and a woman. And the disturbing thing about this video, folks, is that we have the children involved in this madness. Underscores the issue that we have with domestic violence in this country. have the little children involved in this too. The little children. Of course, there are persons who are standing by who are kind of reluctant to get involved. Folks, this underscores a real serious issue that we have, and again, if you go through these videos, it really asks you have to ask yourself, what is really happening? What is really happening? What is really happening? And we'll get your take in just a few as we go. We continue our program. But let's move away from the random videos as to what is happening around our country. What is happening around our country, to deal with some topics right now that I want to really hit home to you guys. Folks, we saw a couple of interesting situations unfolding. Let me go to them right now. The Guyana Police Force, folks. Let me deal with this right away. The Guyana Police Force said to us that they had a confession, and they maintain that they have a confession from a man who said that he light the place on fire. Let's deal with it, because this is a big story. The Guyana Police Force said that they had a confession, right? A video confession from this man. I want you to understand that the Guyana Fire Service said that they did their own investigation and they got no confession from anybody. This is, of course, a day after the man said to his lawyers that he didn't confess to anything. Right? He didn't confess to anything. Let's listen to what the Guyana Fire Service said.
Gators about starting the blaze with setting fire.
Let's listen.
On the same day, the Guyana Police Force went ahead and charged laborer Clarence Green with setting fire to the Brickdam police station. The Guyana Fire Service announced that while it has concluded that the cause of the fire was arson, none of the prisoners, including Green, made any confession to its investigators about starting the blaze. The Guyana Police Force is relying heavily on an alleged confession it announced it has of Green admitting to starting the fire. In addition to being interviewed by the police, all of the prisoners who were in the lockups at the time of the blaze were also interviewed by the fire service as part of its investigations. There were no confessions made during the fire service interviews. Fire Prevention Officer Sheldon Sons said the fire service was very thorough with its investigations, and the investigations have been completed.
I must say that it was a coordinated effort among the Guyana Fire Service and the Guyana Police Force. There were several procedures undertaken in trying to ascertain the cause of that fire. Such procedures would have included interviews, the layout of the fire scene, and also the collection of debris. At this point, it is concluded that the supposed cause for the Brickdam police station fire was suspected arson.
The fire prevention officer also explained the determination of the cause of the fire, being arson, was based on evidence collected at the scene and various statements taken from the prisoners who were interviewed. The fire service was summoned to the Brickdam police station just after 11 o'clock last Saturday morning, as heavy smoke was seen billowing from one of the wooden buildings at the complex. Within minutes, the fire engulfed several buildings and apartments, flattening most of the wooden buildings in the compound.
Right. Now, I want you to understand this, folks, because y'all help me make sense. And I want you to consider the timeline also, you know. I want to consider the timeline. This is on the same day as the Guyana police force is charging a man for setting this thing on fire. The Guyana Fire Service said they got no confession. The Guyana police force is maintaining and standing by their claims that they have a video confession where Mr. Green is saying, look, I burned down this place. I set it afire because I was upset because I was in here too long. Mr. Green then said to his lawyer, look, I don't know what these people are talking about. He said he has no idea. As we consider the timeline, we heard from him.
If I start,
this is a video of Mr. Green leaving the court, and this is what he had to say. This is the man who the alleged confessed.
Frame charging concerning something I don't even know about and I don't even have clue. The chairman said I start a fire inside the laptop and start building, right? I mean, not work with Pagina there. And if I start, I mean, like I say, so I like to look at this matter serious because the chairman.
So you did it? You didn't do it?
You didn't do it, sir.
No, madam, I didn't do nothing like this. The time frame charge me. And the time frame charge me concerning something I don't even know about and I don't even have clue. The chairman said I start a fire inside the laptop and start building, right? I mean, not work with Pagina there. And if I start, I mean, like I say, so I like to look at this matter serious because the time frame charge me.
So you did it? You didn't do it?
You didn't do it, sir.
No, madam, I didn't do nothing like this. The time frame charge me.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. I like to look at this matter seriously, right?
Right. Of course, being objective, nobody would say that they did it. But something in smell right here, folks. Something in smell right. Something in smell right. We had a massive cleanup right away. Almost immediately, we had a massive cleanup. We had the president coming out and speculating that it was politically motivated. Then you hear a man confess. Then the man said, look, I didn't confess. I didn't sign anything. Then the Guyana Fire Service came out and said, look, with our investigation, we confirmed that it's arson, but nobody confessed. My viewers, y'all help us to make sense of it. Y'all help us to make sense of it, because it ain't making sense. It is not making sense, folks. What really happened? What really happened? That is what I want to know. What really happened in the cell? There's a next report that the police saying that the fires confirmed it was started in the fraud department. So this man pushed this wire up through the cell into the fraud department, apparently. What is happening, folks? Y'all tell me, I don't know. I'm hoping that you help me unpack it, and later down in the program, we'll of course have have your say segment where you'll be able to call and tell me what are your thoughts on the Brickdam police station fire. We got to go through, folks. We have to move on. We can't spend too long on this particular topic. Right? Let's move on.
Be thorough in screening persons who require vaccine.
Let's move our attention. Let's focus our attention now on what is happening.
Anthony today warned medical practice.
Sorry, let's focus our attention on what is happening with vaccinations, COVID-19, and the Minister of Health. Now, the Minister of Health has decided that he will focus on a few things. I believe that the Minister of Health in the wrong job. That's how I feel. I honestly feel so. You know why? The other day we reported that he is getting new COVID cards so that people don't fraud the system. Now, he is investigating doctors who are giving medical exemptions to patients because he's claiming that some of them might not be real, it might be fraud. Frank Anthony should be heading the Guyana Police Force. He should be the Minister of Public Security because all he is doing is investigating COVID fraud. We should get Frank Anthony to go in and investigate what is happening with the cash grant fraud, because he seems to be focused on stopping fraud and not saving people's life. I am serious. He said there's going to be new COVID card, vaccination card, because people to stop the fraud. Now, Frank Anthony is all the things that is happening in this country in terms of health care. He is very concerned about doctors who are giving medical exemptions to their patients, sorry. Medical exemptions. He is so concerned with this. All the things happening in this country. Let's listen in, folks.
Practitioners that they must be thorough in screening persons who require vaccine exemption letters. Many persons who have underlying medical conditions have been meeting with their doctors for information about the COVID-19 vaccines and whether they could be exempted because of their medical condition. The health minister explained today that not everyone with an underlying condition could be exempted from the vaccination drive.
The only reason why you would get an exemption, there are probably two reasons. One is that if you have an allergy to one of the vaccines that we're using, then you can be exempted. And secondly, if the components of which the vaccine is made of, if you're allergic to one of those components, then you can be exempted.
Dr. Anthony also said 99% of the medical conditions would not be affected by vaccination.
So if there's that tiny 1% of people, if you fall within that very small category, then the doctor who is seeing you should advise, and those letters should come to the CMO for a counter-signature, and then we'll be able to grant it.
The health minister has issued a warning to medical practitioners who have been issuing vaccination exemption letters without doing sufficient investigation of the patient's condition.
I know some people have been issuing exemptions, but the exemptions cannot be based on any serious medical illness. And so some of those letters that have been issued, we are investigating them. And if they were issued without proper medical information, let's say somebody just write a letter of exemption without doing proper medical investigations and so forth, and that person warrants the exemption, then we are going to put those medical practitioners before the medical council.
Right, folks. Let's just unpack this quickly because we need to go into our economic segment. But Frank Anthony seems very concerned with investigations. What Frank needs to be investigating, he is not doing. Frank has not said we will investigate to find out whether or not the Delta variant is in Guyana. We will investigate these cases in the various regions and do proper contact tracing. We'll investigate the state of the hospital. We'll investigate why people are complaining about the conditions in the hospitals. One person said they should investigate AFA-19 charges. But on a serious note, folks, Frank Anthony is on an investigation spree. He's investigating the cards, the COVID, the vaccination cards. Now he's investigating exemption letters. Frank needs to be at the Ministry of Home Affairs. That is where he needs to be, at the Ministry of Home Affairs, doing head of investigations. Right? Head of investigations. You can't even do proper investigation to do contact tracing to figure out where these persons were who were affected with COVID. You're not doing any of that. But you're investigating whether doctors are giving their patients medical exemptions illegally. We should take Frank Anthony and put him to investigate the cash crash, the farmers' cash grant corruption that's going on. Investigate why are those people who supposed to get COVID relief and get it yet. Apparently he likes investigations. As we still on health, folks, as we are on health, we also saw this story. And I wonder if Frank is investigating this. The head investigator, I wonder if he's investigating this.
Her own life. In a statement, a female patient at the Georgetown Hospital was found dead in the washroom of one of the female wards, and it is suspected that she may have taken her own life. In a statement issued this afternoon, the Georgetown Hospital indicated that a woman's lifeless body was found just after 11 o'clock this morning. The Guyana Police Force and the family of the woman were immediately contacted by members of the hospital's management. The statement did not provide details about the woman, but the hospital said a team has been identified to support the family of the deceased and provide the necessary information to assist the police with its investigations. The hospital said it remains dedicated to providing the best care to the most acutely ill and injured patients and is deeply saddened that a death occurred.
I wonder if Frank is investigating that. Huh? I wonder if the investigation has started yet. Because he's the chief investigator. He's still a minister. He's an investigator. Let's move on, folks. Too many things to stress about. Too many things. And finally, before we go into our economic segment, let's bring to your attention what is happening with the hundreds of cash grants, apparently. This welfare economy, so to speak, that we're running. This handout economy. I can't say welfare because welfare is not a bad thing. But this handout economy, where we're taking small sorts of cash and giving to people individually and hoping that will solve the problem. Let me say this before because we're going to talk about this. We spoke about this before. But this is the government's approach to everything. This is the government's approach to everything, folks. Give handouts. Give handouts. That is their approach to everything. Right? No long-term plan. No increases amongst the public servants as yet. Nothing for the nurses. Nothing for the teachers. None to deal with the high cost of living. All they're doing is band-aid approaches, give handouts. And what has happened with these band-aid approaches? It has opened the gate for corruption, folks. Wanton corruption, I might add. Let's listening to this video and let me see what you think before we get in. Maybe invite me.
In the distribution of the government cash grants of Guyana through the Ministry of Agriculture is seeking the help of farmers and other persons who may have information or evidence related to the allegations of fraud and corruption in the distribution of the government cash grant for farmers. Vice President Barra Jagdeo has announced that information could be forwarded to the Agriculture Ministry within the next month to aid in the investigations. He said persons were hired for the program and those who engaged in corrupt practices will be held accountable. It is suspected that hundreds of persons who did not suffer any losses during the floods earlier this year submitted their names and were given large grants. There appears to have been no proper verification program in place, and complaints started to roll in about the grants being paid out to persons who are not even involved in farming. Over $8 billion was set aside to be disbursed to farmers across the country as part of the relief efforts. Large-scale farmers could have received up to $10 million. Other farmers received various disbursements from as low as $50,000 to over $100,000. The Agriculture Ministry announced several weeks ago that it has launched a probe into the allegations of fraud and corruption.
Fraud and corruption. If there are two words that characterize the PPP, it's fraud and corruption. Now, let me just point out one little fact here before we move from this segment, folks. And something that Gordon said just now, we thank News Source for the videos that we're showing you. No proper system of verification was put in place. So any Johnny come lately could have put down his name and said, I had a farm, I had 500 acres, and all gone. So I'm eligible for money. No problem. How could you, as a government, set aside $8 billion to give as aid and don't put a system in place to verify that the people you're giving the aid to are who they say they are? These are the people who said to us that we can manage. We know how to govern. And daily, every single day, 432 days of this administration, you can account the blunders, the step-by-step blunder. Total shambles, every single sector. At the bare minimum, any forestier management student will tell you that you must have some sort of system of verification. You can't give out money to anybody. So now when you have hundreds of people collecting money that they're not supposed to collect, you're running around like headless chickens now about you're asking the public now to do your job. They're asking the public to give information to them about these people so that they can verify. Talk about putting the cart before the horse. The Minister of Agriculture, somebody said project management first thing. How are you managing the project when you don't even know if the people that you're giving the money to are supposed to receive it? How? Now when you already give out the money to the people, you already allow your friends and cronies to manage a project and mismanage it and give any and anybody money. You're asking the public to help you. Oh, please help us find out whether or not we give the money to the right people. These are the people, folks. These are the people who campaigned and said, let us run the country. We, the PVP, know how to run country. That is what they said to the people. We know how to do the thing right. And all we've gotten is chaos, confusion, corruption, and fraud. That is all that we have gotten. And they have created the environment for that. They have nurtured and fostered that environment with little transparency, little accountability, little to no reporting. in every single cash grant that you see there, that is what it's characterized by. Little accountability, no reporting, no verification. It is just a hotbed of confusion, folks. And as we're talking about money, we're going to segue right into our economic segment this evening. We want to welcome in our economic contributor and economist and advisor to the Office of the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Elson Low, to our program. Elson, good evening and welcome to our program this evening.
Good evening, good evening.
Thank you very much for being a part. Thank you very much for being a part today. We want to say thank you to you. As usual on Fridays, our viewers look out for the information in terms of what is happening in the economy. What is happening in the economy? How does that affect you? And general information about what is going on, because economics affects us all. Elson, good evening again. Now let us start with GDP growth. We had a report coming out for the first half of the year, I believe, or the first quarter. I think it was the first half, where we saw 14.5% GDP growth, fueled, of course, by, no pun intended, the oil industry. That growth fueled by the oil industry primarily. But, we saw increases in manufacturing and construction, a number of other areas. But what does that mean for the average Guyanese? How does that impact my life? Because you might be telling me we have 14.5% GDP growth, but I go to the bank in the the end of the month, and my money still barely or not even accounting for my expenses. I go to the shop and I still see that's happening. How does that relate to a better life for Guyanese?
Yeah, so we saw that growth in the oil sector. However, perhaps a better measure is the growth in the non-oil sector.
Yeah.
That's all of the other industries in the country. And there you would have seen a growth of 4.8%. But the expected growth, according to the IDB, was 6.1%. So as much as they are boasting about this high growth rate and so on and so forth, they have actually underperformed the expectations that the IDB had for the country's growth, right? Okay. So let's not fool ourselves into thinking this is a good number. This is actually a very poor number because it is substantially below what we're expected to do. Now, of course, this would partly be due to the floods that would have affected the economic growth. However, as we've mentioned previously, the lack of a response in terms of financial support to businesses in addressing COVID has actually created a situation where our recovery has been slower than it would otherwise have been. And so this underperformance that you're seeing of 4.8% growth versus 6.1% growth in the non-oil economy is the result of that.
Yeah.
So that's one element of it. The other element of it, which is important to understand, is this growth occurred in the context of 5.6% inflation or something like that over the course of the past year, which means that as much as the economy would have grown by 4.8%, right? Think about the GDP as being the income of the country. As much as that has grown by 4.8%, the inflation rate has been higher than that, which means that in terms of the amount of goods and services that people can buy, they can actually buy fewer than before. Right,
and
so that just goes.
Let me just jump in here, because that's important for our viewers.
Sure.
We might be seeing these growth, which of course 14% sounds like a good thing, but note that it was projected to be more than that. But what is really impacting to you, the consumer, is the level of inflation, and which affects the value of your dollar. And how much you can afford in the store. That is a number that we need to look at. Continue down that same line.
Exactly. Because we haven't seen, or at least there's not data to indicate that we've seen a growth in consumers' income. That is higher than the inflation rate. Right? Even if consumers' income kept up with the real economy's growth, with the actual economy's growth, because this inflation rate is so high, that actually just means that you can purchase less this year. You're worse off than you were previously, right? And as we've expressed, the reason for that, or the reason that we haven't seen, proper income growth is because we haven't been supporting sectors the way we should have through the government budget. They've been very miserly. They should have provided multiple rounds of grants, which should have been wired to people's accounts and so on and so forth in order to prop the economy. And in those areas that suffered a lot, like tourism, like restaurants, entertainment, they should have been supported because they have contracted and they've not fully recovered. And as a result, the income in those areas would have fallen. And as a result of that fall, it pulls down the entire national income, really.
Yeah.
So because that response has been poor, we're seeing this underperformance. So let's not run away with the idea that this is good performance, first of all. And the other thing that is important to note, because people might still say, oh, 4.8%, you're growing so fast, that's excellent, those types of things. But we had a substantial short recession last year, or at least the entire global economy, and I'm sure that Guyana had as well, a substantial recession. And what happens after you have a sharp contraction like that is that the bounce back, the increase in growth to pull you back out is always very quick and is always very substantial. So if you think about it, if you fall 10% and you bounce back 10%, where are you? At the same place you were. It's not that your economy is bigger or anything like that. So this is to be expected. It's not particularly due to government efforts or anything like that. In fact, Guyana has bounced back on a slower rate than several developed economies. I think the US has bounced back a bit faster than Guyana. And the question that you have to ask yourself is, why would a big economy like that be growing faster than a small economy? Normally, small economies grow much quicker than big economies. So that again...
Go ahead. Sorry, finish.
Yeah, what I'm saying is that again speaks to poor economic management. We should always be overperforming those types of big economies, and maybe they'll want to use the excuse, well, they didn't have money and so on. But I think that's an excuse you have to use before you're an oil producer, because you'll observe that energy prices have been through the roof. And in fact, oil is again hovering near the $80 mark. We've gotten $80 million oil hauls lately. And so we've been making a substantial amount of money.
Yeah.
So there's no excuse for not pumping stimulus into the economy in order to get it going the way that it should be going, especially in sectors that suffered when we want to try and revive those sectors to boost economic growth.
Yeah.
So I think as much as they try to make these numbers look like good numbers, I think anybody who has a good idea of what's going on will immediately spot them as problematic.
Yeah, but that's it. The knowledge of what is happening, and as you said, growth in a small country, not only a small country, a small country with considerable amount of oil wealth now. And as we talk about oil wealth, we saw another find recently, now pushing our total barrels of 10 billion, something like that. I think it's 10 billion barrels. But
10 billion.
I know that you have done considerable work in investigating the extent of the oil wealth in your work in economics and thing, and especially with suggesting programs that we can do to benefit the people. You have to understand how much money we're actually getting. What does this new oil find mean for us? For the future? Put it in context so that the average person on the street can say, okay, this is how I can benefit. Because we know that has been a question, that has been a question for all Guyanese. What is the benefit to me? How the Exxon find more oil? What does that mean for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So as you would have mentioned, I've done extensive research on the oil and gas industry. I've looked at the histories of Norway, Equatorial Guinea, Trinidad, Venezuela, so as to be able to get a sense of where Guyana is headed. Now we're finding more and more oil. We've gone up to 10 billion barrels, and I think it is very reasonable for citizens to ask, how am I benefiting? I'm not seeing the benefits. Even today, we're talking about us producing oil and getting a lot of money for it, higher profits than we really anticipate. We expect $50 on average, but we're at $80 now. So, and people are crying out that they're not benefiting, that times are hard. So that already, I think makes it very reasonable to ask that question. But what we're doing in the opposition is we're working on programs and structures to ensure that people will benefit in ways that are very direct, so that they can feel the real impact of the oil and gas sector, and so that they can feel that it is working for them instead of working for whatever rich politicians are in charge and whatever businessmen may have a connection. Right? We are going to make sure, and you can have the fullest of confidence that as long as I'm involved and helping to create these policies, I'll bring this research, and we will be able to ensure that people benefit very directly. So that is something that has been on the way for some time, and you'll hear more about that in the future. But as we find more oil, we have to also consider what are the effects of this. Because one of the things that the economic literature would indicate about the oil and gas economy and things like corruption and things like citizens benefiting is that because all of these funds are coming from the government, right? It's government to the people, government distributing to the people. It creates a lot more incentive for corruption, because now the government is involved in all the economic activity, right? So that means that you need to have more robust safeguards to ensure that the money is not being stolen by politicians who have their hands in the public coffers. You have to ensure you have robust safeguards. And those are the types of things that we've researched and that we will ensure are put in place so that the ordinary Guyanese does benefit.
Yeah. And as we talk about things putting in place so that the ordinary Guyanese can benefit, we saw the reduction of excise taxes on fuel, which is, of course, aimed at giving you an ease at the pump. I saw one gas station from 213 down to 190 something. Now, these are things that we need, and I know that the government is in a bind. And let me say this: sometimes we give we have to call them out when we do bad things. I think that this is a good thing, but I know the situation with oil. I know the situation with now the complexities now that we are an oil producer, and persons may be asking, well, we're producing it, but it's still expensive. We are not using our own oil, so that's another thing. We're still importing oil. But tell us about this and what other measures do you feel we need to impose or put in place to ease the burden? Because people are saying, like I'm reading in the comments now, persons are saying, look, more oil, but more cost of living, it seems. The cost of living seems to be going up. Every time we find oil, it seems to be pushing the cost of living higher. What about these measures and more of these, and what are some of the other things that we need to do to ease the burden on the consumers?
Yes. Now, one of the things I think again is important to recognize is this cut in the excise fuel tax is not like somehow some sort of spectacular idea or some original.
It's always been happening. It's been happening all the time now.
That's normal. So I don't give them any credit whatsoever for doing what everybody always does. That's normal,
okay.
Right? So let's put that aside. It's good that these consumers are now benefiting, but we would have done exactly the same thing.
Yes, I remember the AP and UFC did cut the excise tax, and there too, this is a practice that has long been there. Over there, 23 years, over 5 years, we always try to use the
This is a stabilization practice to ensure that prices do not rise too quickly and disturb local economic activity and disturb everyday people's lives, right? So as much as it's a good thing, it's a long-standing policy, so I don't give them any credit for something like that. Now, the other side of it is, though, and as we continue to see people concerned about costs and so on, is that we have to be very aware of the way that an oil economy impacts costs in other areas. And that, of course, I think will primarily come in the real estate area. Right now, we're doing research as to how we can ease a lot of this burden, because people are complaining rents are getting to be ridiculous and so on.
Mhm.
But of course, if you're a property owner, I am a property owner, and I'll tell you something. Every time we find oil in Guyana, I increase the price at which I'd be willing to sell my property,
Of course.
right?
Of course.
So that is a direct benefit, but it is not a direct benefit for people who are renting, who don't have property, and that's primarily going to be young people or poorer people and so on. So we have to look at ways to ease them, to give them relief, so that they are not squeezed and their standard of living does not decline as a result of oil.
Yeah.
And that is something that we are working on, and you'll see policies and so on come out to address that.
Yeah.
Now,
I
the
want
other
to-
thing, keep on.
No, go ahead. Let me hear the other thing.
Yeah, the other thing that I think we should not gloss over though is that as we consider the effects of oil, we have to look at the effects of oil on other industries. You and I had a discussion last week, I believe it was, about Gaisuko and about the need for the workers to be retrained so as to facilitate the manpower need in the oil and gas industry. And of course, I would have remarked to you over the course of the week that we saw the vice president announcing that they're going to be retraining these Gaisuko workers in oil and gas, which is, leads me to wonder whether the man is watching our programs and so on, because that's what we said. So we'll thank him for the compliment. And they say copying is the sincerest form of flattery. So we'll leave it at that. But the point being that industry has some serious questions being asked before it, because as we indicated previously, what is going on is that as wages rise across the economy, you have to pay Gaisuko workers more in order to keep them on the job, which means it's going to be more expensive to keep Gaisuko going, right? And now you're even seeing little inklings like, they want to explore mechanization for a small part of Gaisuko and so on. And I am very curious as to how they're going to explain mechanization to their supporters when, they're promising never to shut it down, never to
Mechanization means less jobs for persons, because let me just go in on this, because I often marvel at the fact that these people had 23 years, and in those 23 years there were constant calls from experts to retool, mechanize, divest, move away. The problem with mechanization, because I had a conversation with one of an executive from the sugar industry. It was one of my lecturers at UG. And he gave me some good insight. He said, problem with mechanization in Gaisuko is that the layout of the plantations, and I call them plantations because it has its heritage from slavery days. The layout of those fields does not lend itself to machines. It was designed so that you can cut the canes, throw them in the pontoon, and send them down the canal. So there are these big canals, and there are a number of other design flaws that if you had to mechanize, and you had to change up a lot of things and how the estates were put together. So they had a number of years to get this together. They were given money from the EU to train these people. Elson, and I want you to comment on this. Many persons have suggested that a good way to keep those sugar workers employed is to plant something else. To plant something else that will be more profitable, because the competition for sugar in the world market is fierce. And we have countries like Brazil and them who are not even planting the sugar and then even using it for sugar cane. They making ethanol with it and all madness. And so sugar is produced at a very, very low cost. And we still have people doing what they did in slavery days, which is walking through the cane fields, cutting cane and throwing it in the pontoon. And so the ideas that were put forward were rejected by the PPP government for some reason. And now we are looking at the place where Gaisuko is just here on our backs. And I think that it is time that we start thinking about a different crop And you know, we belabor this point, but it is
Well,
shocking the country.
well,
Go
what I
ahead.
would say is this.
Mhm.
I think that one of the fundamental misunderstandings about sugar is that sugar is really the cash cow, right?
Mhm.
I don't see sugar as being the cash cow. It is important for us to recognize that we have some of the best rum in the world, and we win rum awards and so on
Yes,
regularly,
yes,
right? And so that is an area where we can export and get some value added rather than just sugar package, sugar bulk, sugar this. You know, those things are not necessarily going to give you the full value. However, we have other industries that are very much profitable and that have a lot of growth potential. The way that you talk about it in the investment community is it's called the TAM, the total addressable market. You know,
Mm.
how many people consume rum? How many people consume alcohol across the globe? I always say we have the best rum, but do we have the best selling rum? And so I
Yeah,
think there is considerable room for maneuvering and for adjustment in that industry once it is mechanized to bring costs down to facilitate rum production and rum export to be a major driver in the long term, separate from the oil economy of our nation. So that to
yeah,
me is the way to approach this thing, not to perpetuate this and not to be paying people ridiculous sums to continue to do things that are not productive. Now you're
yeah,
looking at this $250,000. They're saying that this is, the people worked with Gaisuko the years, and it's kind of framing it as a sympathetic kind of thing and so on. And what I'm getting at is this seems to be proceeding from the assumption that workers at Gaisuko did not receive severance,
yeah.
and they received an average of over $600,000 of severance.
Yep,
They received
yep.
on average about 9 months worth of public servant minimum wage. 9 months.
Mhm.
That's a substantial period of time. They could have found employment opportunities. They didn't have to work for 9 months. You had very large severances that were paid out.
Yeah,
And the severances that were under 500,000 were paid out immediately as one payment. Boom.
yeah,
So it is not to say that none of this occurred and there's some historic injustice that's going on. The law was complied with, to the full extent of it. There were even court cases to ensure compliance.
yes.
So I don't know where this argument is coming from. And if you want to make the argument that, we want to be sympathetic, why aren't we being sympathetic, as someone has mentioned, to our nurses who are putting their lives on the line in this pandemic? We could have
Yeah.
given them the 250,000. Why aren't we looking at the University of Guyana, which they've promised to make free and have made no moves to make free? We
Yes.
could have reduced the tuition. Someone was indicating to me that 250,000 is the vast majority of his whole tuition. It'd
Yep.
be nice if they could help him out.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So that this idea that you're just gonna dole out money for the sake of doling out money without any kind of rationale now means that everybody is now asking, well, what's going on? And even
What's going
now,
on?
BAWU, the union is already saying, well, all sugar workers should get this money, And
Yeah. Not just the retrenched one, not just the ones who are laid off. Everybody.
And so the point being, we got to know what we're doing. We have to have, I'm not saying don't give people money. I'm saying you have to have a specific reason, a specific outcome, a specific focus, something like that. Even in Brazil where they provided cash grants to people, it was contingent upon your children attending school.
Yeah.
To make sure that you don't have truancy and to make sure that people finish school and write our equivalent CXC and so on, So there's ways that you can produce these types of programs, but none of them say just hand out the money and say, well, thank you, me a use friend.
Yeah.
That kind of comedic. That is not appropriate at all. And as a result of it, it sets a bad precedent. Because do you mean to tell me that every time they feel like it, they're just going to dole out the $250,000?
Yeah. Yeah.
That is how you become Venezuela. Like that. That's how it happens. You have to have rationales, you have to have structures, and you have to have a proper plan as to how you intend to develop the economy, because otherwise this money will be squandered, and that is what is going on, in my humble opinion.
As we're on the topic of squandering money and doling out money, we saw this story recently, Elson, with the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Anderndian Affairs arrested on fraud allegations during a police sting operation. All of this.
They're very busy over there, man. I didn't know all of that was going on.
Yes. Signs of the times, according to my friend Sherrod Duncan. What are your thoughts on this? As we wrap up this segment?
Well, I want to drill in on this in a very tight way. So essentially, what is going on is there's an allegation that that this person has said that she secured contracts for the man's father, and the man's father passed away, and in order for this to keep going on, for him to keep getting these contracts, he has to give her $200,000 a month, which is what we call a kickback in the anti-corruption community, right? So she's drawing down $200,000 to give this man contracts. Allegedly. Now, where is this $200,000 coming from? Is it coming from the man's profits? No. What is happening is that in these types of arrangements, they will inflate the price that they're charging for the guard services and so on by the amount that they're going to give as the bribe. You see? And so when you get the contract, you now take the difference, right? Over and above your profit, over and above your costs, the difference, and you give it back to the person that gives you the contract, right? And that's the bribe or the kickback and so on and so forth. And so that is what appears to be the case. We know, obviously, we'll give her day in court, but that is how this thing is shaking out. But I want to draw your viewers' attention to something that I find particularly interesting. Now, there was a recent article about a guard service that had to let go, or said that it would have to let go of its 2,000 strong workforce because it couldn't get these contracts. And one of the things that came up is that the contracts were awarded to a bidder that was charging in excess of $900 million. They bid 500 million, 560 million, I believe. And the contract was awarded to the 900 and something $million bidder. Now, the gap between those two figures is in excess of $400 million. And you know that guard services don't really change by that much. You know, it's more or less the same industry, a few adjustments here and there. But they are charging them almost double. And I'm now starting to think to myself, should we question whether that is another example of what we might be seeing here today? Because what is the justification? What is the justification for charging 400 million more? And when we see allegations that another guard service in another ministry is getting a kickback every single month, and there's no time limit described, this sounds like it's from now until the end of time, right? So you can see why these things are costing so much more than they actually do cost. This is procurement fraud. This is the danger on the PPP. And this will be the danger more and more as oil money starts to be a part of our economy and our government spending. I want citizens to understand right down to the bottom of their toes. This gives you a good sense of what is going on. And I'll tell you something else. You think that this is the only ministry? If these allegations bear out to be true, you think this is the only ministry where this is going on?
Of course not.
You think this is the only contract where this is going on?
Of course
if this is going on for 5 contracts, you mean to tell me that people are drawing on $1 million a month of kickbacks?
Yep.
For ministry?
Yep.
I mean, you know, no wonder. You know, when people ask why you're not seeing progress in Guyana. I mean,
what you said there is interesting, Elson, because we know that the ministry normally works on these strict court system and bidding for contracts. They normally take the lowest one and all of these measures. And this speaks to the level of accountability and transparency that we have. And I'm hoping that our comrades who are on the Public Accounts Committee, right, are able to shed some light on those things that you highlighted. Why is it that we're taking a contract that is worth almost 400,000 more. What is happening?
400 million.
400 million, not 400,000. 400 million more, right? What is really going on? What is going on? And of course, we continue to highlight these levels of corruption as we keep our eye on what is happening with this wicked and corrupt government. Elson, do not go. I want to keep you on the line as I invite my viewers to have their say this evening. Folks, before we let you go, we have a few more minutes before the start of In the Ring with Sher Duncan, but I would like to hear from our viewers. I haven't heard from you in a while. I would like to hear from you and have your say this evening. Let's head right into that segment. Right, welcome back to this segment. We're ready for you to have your say. The number is 618-7321, 618-7321. We're talking about all things happening in Guyana. We're talking about the level of corruption that we're seeing. We're talking about this fire. We're talking about the 14% GDP. We're talking about cost of living. We're talking about crime. Let us hear what you have to say this evening. The number is on the screen to have your say, 618-7321. We are live with economist Elson Low, our economic contributor on our program of every Friday is bringing to you the credible and valid information. We want to say thank you very much to those persons who join us and continue to share the live stream. Continue even as if you're viewing this program when it's not live. If you come after the view, you can still press the share button. For those persons who are looking at us from YouTube, remember to subscribe. Leave a comment, subscribe. If you're looking at us from Facebook, remember you can also like the page so you can get notification when we're on. The numbers on the screen. If you have a question for Elson, if you have a general question or a contribution to the program, give us a call, 618-7321, 618-7321, and have your say this evening. We will want to hear from you before we go, folks. We want to say thank you, of course. Elson, let's continue our conversation as we await the callers. What is the, I'm looking at the relief efforts. And I too, as a Guyanese citizen, every time I go to the supermarket, I am wondering. The other day, I spent $4,000 in one little black bag of things from the supermarket. And I'm wondering what happened to the days when you could have gone to the supermarket with $5,000. What are some other measures you think need to be put in place? Like we saw the removal of the import tax for those importers. And we saw, of course, at the beginning of their tenure, the rolling back of some VAT on some items. And of course, we saw the electricity thing that they announced by the president. Basically, if you're paying under $3,000 electricity a month, you're getting electricity for free. I don't know who pays that, but what are some of the other measures as we talk about solutions?
Well, one of the things that, or what I would say is one of the best ways to approach this is when it comes to things like food. We recently had a huge spike in greens and vegetables prices and so on across the market. One of the things that I think you can do as a government is to encourage more production from your farmers so that will now come into the market and push the price down. You see? And similarly, you want to encourage people importers to import more and so on. But let's look at farming and let's look specifically at vegetables, as that is something that the average man consumes. You go market and you get your vegetables and so on. And people will really complain about the price. Of course, the joke was that the girls now want the man with the shell out because that's that's the new thing. That's the gold chain.
You can afford to buy groceries, you're a big thing.
You're a big thing. Yeah. But yeah, so the government can offer incentives for farmers to increase production. That's not something that we've seen them really do at all. And that, even if it is some loan facilities and so on to help them to get back on their feet, the compensation for loss in the flooding is good. But does that say anything about future production? Does that say anything about easing food costs going forward? Because we don't know that the farmers will be using that money to expand operations. That's just a
We have a
compensation for losses.
right. We
You
have a
know?
caller. So let's take this first call. Caller, good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening to you, Mr. Critchlow, and good evening to all the viewers. I just wanted to say that it is very difficult for me to highlight one particular issue, one particular issue that I'm having, because there's so many issues as it relates to the way the public servants are being treated, as it relates to the forced vaccination as a separate issue. All of these things are just compounded as it relates to wrongful incarceration. It is bullying. We could say that right now we have bullying as the number one topic, but then there are different
in different areas.
Exactly. Yeah. Subgroups of the bullying. And it is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I am not angry anymore at those persons in command, those persons that are making these policies and whatnot. I was, but I'm no longer angry. I am angry with myself. I am angry with you. And I'm angry with every other viewer here who recognizes the issue. Because we see it. But the question is, what are we doing about it? You know, we talk and we vent our frustration. But what are we doing? Nothing. And that is why it continues to happen. So we have to blame ourselves for some of the things that are happening. We have to stop waiting for somebody else to fight for us. And we have to stand up and fight. If it's a share of a live broadcast, if it is a Facebook post, if it is a protest, whatever it is, we have to stand up and fight. Because at the end of the day, that is what is going to get some attention. You cannot be upset about something and then expect it to be resolved. You have to do something about it.
Yeah.
So I'm speaking to myself as well.
Yeah.
And that is why I made this call. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for that comment. Thank you for that comment. And you know, one of the viewers is saying, well said, and we think we understand your frustration. And I've said it before that when the people are ready, when the people have had enough, there will be an uprising. There will be changes made. And I believe, you know, we're living in a democratic country, and I think people are understanding very, very clearly and you know, swiftly that their vote is very important and their participation in the political process is important. And when that time comes for you to make a decision, it is not for you to waver and say, well, it's not going to affect me, because you realize that the politics of the day affects every single body. So you can't say it didn't affect you. You can't sit down at home and say it didn't affect you. Cannot. You have to make a decision. You have to be firm on polling day and go and make your choice. Elson.
Yeah, I can definitely sympathize with those frustrations. And as a result of us seeing all of the poor policies and the poor governance that's going on, you know, we're formulating policies to address the challenges of the nation so that going forward we can see progress rather than just more of the same, and certainly not sliding down to these poor standards. So that is why, you know, we talk to the people, we try to listen to their concerns, we try to listen to what the specific problems are, and we try to develop policies to address them, so that when it comes to the next manifesto, it comes to the next election, you know, we'll see people's needs really answered. You know, that's the goal. And of course, it is important for us all to speak out. It's important for us all to come together. As she said, shared live streams, you know, post about things that you don't like, you know.
Yeah, be part of the movement.
Yeah, be part of the movement, you know. You know, one of the things that sometimes concerns me about Guyana is, so we see now a very serious allegation against the permanent secretary with what appears to be very substantial evidence. I'm really, really curious if this permanent secretary is going to end up in jail.
Yeah.
I'm
Interesting.
curious,
Interesting.
because I can't really name anybody that the PDP has ever put in jail.
Yeah.
And I mean, we carried people to court, but obviously those cases were never resolved. And then when we left office, DVP dismissed the cases. It's not like the cases were resolved. And so I'm very curious as to see how this is going to play out. Maybe they will make a sacrifice here and send her to jail. But it's one of those things. I'll believe it when I see it.
I do hope that she gets a fair trial, like we wish anybody else, that the justice system is fair to her and all the information is out there. Whether or not she is guilty, we do not know. Again, these are allegations at this point in time of fraud, but let us see what happens. Elson, I want to thank you very much for contributing. Of course, every Friday to this program, we continue to watch the economic progress of the country, and that is something that we'll be watching with keen eyes, because of course there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of money out on the shores, right, that are being pumped up and shipped out at the moment. And so how we benefit from that is going to be important and it'll be the forefront of everybody's mind. Before you go, I want to have your opinion quickly on this. Your general outlook, economic outlook forecast for Guyana. 10 years from now, where do you see us?
Well, as we're talking about allegations of corruption against a senior public official, as we're talking about the production of oil, as we're talking about grants being given out left, right, and center without justification, I think that when the coalition is returned to office, and I expect that to be soon, that will allow Guyana to make strides forward, and that's how we'll see the country really progress and develop over the course of the next 10 and 15 years. However, if we do not see that, if the PDP is allowed to continue with the same techniques they have right now, I think we will see very sluggish growth, and it is possible that we'll see those sorts of disasters that we've seen in Venezuela. Because again, for you to be giving out huge sums of money without a rationale is a very dangerous practice, and without an economic rationale, and requires some serious thought by every right-thinking guidance. So those are the two paths ahead of us, and we as Guyanese need to make a serious decision as to what path it is that we want to walk.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Elson. As we wrap up the program now, we want to say thank you very much for coming through. Folks who joined us, we want to say thank you very much, Elson. Do enjoy the rest of your evening. Right. Thank you very much, Elson Low there, our economic contributor, economist, and advisor to the Office of the Leader of the Opposition, giving us insights on what is happening in our economy. We want to move on quickly now, folks, and wrap up the program. We want to say thank you very much and tell you how you can support the program. If you have information, you can contact us. If you have information, you can contact us, 618-7321. Or 617-0244. If you have information to share, do not be afraid. You can WhatsApp us. I think we have another caller here. Caller?
Hi, good evening.
Hi, good evening.
I'm calling again because of the question that you just asked as it relates to the economic situation of Guyana.
Yes.
And I wanted to make the point again that is in the hands of you, that is in the hands of me, and all other Guyanese. We are responsible for what happened. We see what is going on in our nation, and you have to understand, social studies teaches us that the most important resource in a country is the human resource, not the natural resources, because the human resource is what would exploit and would use and would manipulate and would use the natural resources.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we are responsible. Our problem is not that we are not resourceful, right? I would tell my students time and time again that if culture was money, Guyana would be the richest country in the world because we're rich in culture. But we have so many people who do not understand that. So we are in charge. But then we look at society and our world here where we live in with a political eye, which is okay if it is the right direction we're looking in. We see what is going on in our society, and we see that things are not the way that they should be. Things will never be perfect, but it would definitely be better. We have had betterment during the tenure of the new ANC. We would have had that, and everyone knows it. If they want to stifle their conscience, they can go ahead and do that.
Yeah.
But that is the truth.
All right, Carla. Thank you very much for your contribution again to the program as we wrap up. Persons had an opportunity to have their say, folks. Again, thank you very much for joining us on a Friday. We hand you over to Sherrod Duncan. Thank you very much for being a part. Of course, you can support us. Before you go, let us tell you that we have a PayPal account, therushgy@gmail.com, or you can support us locally, 618-7321, 617-0244 as our MMG accounts. Of course, help us continue. Help us to continue to bring the credible and valuable information to you. Thank you very much, every single one who was a part. Remember, still share the live stream, folks. Still share the live stream. Thank you very much for being a part of the program today. Do enjoy. Stay safe. Let's continue to work together for national development, folks. My name is Randolph Critchlow. Do enjoy the rest of the evening.
One time for the bass, alright. Back in the day we used to live Charlotte Street. Just learn to walk and speak. Me woulda grab a bucket, 2 stick of milk in and gone in the yard and beat. Miss Paul used to suck up she teeth. We didn't kick cause the music sweet. You could hear me little voice in Regent Street, but I'm still in the game. On the stage